What's up guys and welcome to the weekly Q&A. Before we get started, I need to give 3 quick shoutouts to Lee Griffin, who joined Patreon at the Jedi Council level, and Brad Tracy and Lauren Qualls, who both joined as Jedi Masters. That is huge. Thank you to all 3 of you. I can't tell you enough how much your support means to us. Our first question comes from Manuel Zimmerman, who asks if I'm ever annoyed at the fact that the Star Wars movies seem to be made for a more casual Star Wars audience. That is something that I talk about a lot. Like, if people ask me if I think Ahsoka or Thrawn will show up and play a major role in Episode 9, I just kinda doubt it, because most people in the theater wouldn't know who those people are. We'd have to spend valuable screen time explaining why they're important. So I always tend to think that cameos like the one that Chopper had in Rogue One, I think that's far more likely than a character from comics or TV or books popping up in a major way in the films. Now, I wouldn't say that that's something that annoys me, it's just something that I have come to accept. But it's also something I wouldn't mind seeing change. I would love for one day Lucasfilm to feel comfortable including elements from every facet of the Star Wars canon, not really just the movies and the highly marketable characters. And I do think that it's possible to get there. For example, I would consider myself a very casual fan of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I have enjoyed pretty much every single one of those movies, and I don't know anything about those characters going in. I do know enough about Marvel to know that the Guardians of the Galaxy, for example, are a very deep cut. So I assume if Marvel can get away with it, eventually so can Star Wars. They can start including some more obscure stuff. But remember, it took some time to get the MCU to a point where Guardians of the Galaxy could be a thing. Lucasfilm, I think, is still finding their footing a little bit. We're still in the very early days of these new Star Wars movies. We've only had 3 so far. And additionally, I think it would be difficult and challenging to do an Ahsoka movie or a Thrawn movie, because they can't just do an origin story. We've read their stories in books and comics, and we saw Ahsoka's in the Clone Wars TV show, so it's not like they can just retell that story in movie form. I mean, they could, but the people that have already experienced that story, it wouldn't excite them. Whereas, to jump back to Guardians of the Galaxy, that movie was an introduction to casual fans, but also it was an introduction to the comic fans to see this new interpretation. The MCU is set apart from their comic storylines, and that's not the case when it comes to Star Wars. The films and the comics and the books and the TV shows, every story is in the same universe. So doing movie adaptations of books, I just don't see that as being particularly exciting, and there's just a different challenge there. So to answer your question, does it annoy me? No, not really. I've come to accept it. But as this continues on, as we continue exploring the new canon, I do hope that Lucasfilm finds ways to get a little more nerdy with it. A lot of people on Patreon and YouTube want to know what I think Jon Favreau's new streaming series will be about. I have no idea, but since I was gone during the announcement, I did want to address it, play a little catch up. So as for Favreau's involvement, I am very excited. I think he is a super talented guy. I like at least all the movies of his that I've seen, Chef and Iron Man, and I look forward to watching Elf every Christmas. So him being brought in tells me that Lucasfilm is not half-assing this, even though it's going to be for TV or a streaming service. They're giving this a lot of attention, so I think that's a good sign. As for what it might be about, I still think Star Wars Underworld being revisited is an option. Just, I know that so much work went into that series development back in the day that I think they have to at least be exploring bringing it back. I also think an Old Republic series is very likely or possible. That's kind of the direction I'm leaning in, or at least that's what I'm hoping for, just because I want to start seeing stories set outside of the 7 or so decades of the Skywalker saga. I just want to start exploring new eras, and I think that a streaming series would be perfect for that. Timothy Ritter asks why both the Darth Vader and main Star Wars comics are exploring Mon Cala right now. I think that was probably a conscious decision made on the part of writers Kieran Gillen and Charles Soule. I think the Darth Vader comic is kind of setting the stage for what we're reading about in the main Star Wars run, and I think that's a really cool idea to kind of get parallel stories with similar themes at the same time. Timothy also asked who I think the cloaked Jedi at the end of the latest Darth Vader issue was. My guess is Quinlan Vos, but I don't have any real evidence for that except that his name was mentioned a few issues ago in Darth Vader, so he's likely still alive. I do think that it is someone that we know or will recognize, otherwise they would have just shown the Jedi's face. But the fact that they were hidden and cloaked, to me that means there's going to be a big reveal, and we're going to be very excited about who it is. Brad Tracy wants to know if the Mandalorian armor worn by Cobb Vanth in the Aftermath trilogy is Boba Fett's armor. I believe that it is because the first time we saw it on a Jawa sandcrawler, it was described as being pocked with acid, probably stomach acid, so I think that all signs are pointing towards that being Fett's armor. Now, why he took it off or how he lost it, that has yet to be seen. I'm going to guess that he did survive the Sarlacc pit, and maybe he just stripped his armor off, or maybe he was unconscious and Jawas took it off of him, or maybe he is dead and Jawas still took it. We don't know. I think that his survival is more likely, but yeah, I think that the book itself is definitely hinting that that is his armor, and we're going to find out what actually happened to him down the line. Joe Caggiano asks what will happen to the TIE Defender project now that Grand Admiral Thrawn is out of the picture. I think that the Defender is probably done, at least its production line. Price blew up the fuel depot. Like you said, Thrawn is just gone or missing. Tarkin hinted that Krennic was trying to pull funds away from the Defender for the Death Star anyway. And we never saw the Starfighter in the original trilogy, so in my mind, all signs point towards at least the production of it ending. So there might still be Defenders out there, but just not on a large scale. That's it for patron questions. If you're a patron and you didn't see your question answered here, just head over to Patreon where I left you a written response. If you're not a patron, you can learn more by following the link in the description. Just $1 a month will get you access to extra Star Wars Explained content like audio commentaries for the films or roles in my Discord server, and the combined donations really go a long way in supporting the channel. On to YouTube questions. The Burger Hut 7 asks if we're getting too much content set in between episodes 3 and 4. I would actually agree with that, but I would open it up to in between episodes 3 and 5. We've had a ton of books and comics set in that era, and I do think that there are reasons for it, like in the case of the sequel trilogy. They don't want to do too much after Return of the Jedi, especially like in Luke's case, because they didn't want to give away what his character would be like or why until The Last Jedi. So they kinda are trying to be careful with what revelations come out in books and comics and what comes out in the movies. I think they want to save the bigger stories and the more exciting ones for the films. In addition, we also have, like, before Episode 1, before the Clone Wars era, there are thousands of years that we can explore there, so why haven't we gotten into that yet? I think that is kind of the same thing. They're probably trying to decide what stories to tell in films, what to tell in books, and so on. But that kind of has its own separate set of challenges in that they have to decide what that era is going to look like, what actually did happen. I think they have to map out their history at least a little bit before they can dive in. But I think that they have been doing that. And with the announcement of Rian Johnson's trilogy and the David Benioff series of films, which could be more than a trilogy, and now Jon Favreau's live-action series, I have to assume that at least one of those projects is going to be exploring a new era. I think they have been figuring that out, and that they do want to expand, but like I said, it's just that they want the bigger, more exciting stories to probably pave the way for these new eras. And then once that happens, the floodgates are going to open and we're going to get books and comics and all that good stuff. Nelkir Son von Balgroof wants to know if I think Darth Plagueis used the world between worlds to save people from death. I've been asked that a lot, and I do think it's a possibility, but that's not the impression that I got. For some reason, I think a Sith would have some difficulty getting there, and I think it was a big deal that Ezra made it at all. Obviously, Darth Sidious doesn't know how to get in, he needs Ezra's help, But I would say that it's totally possible that Darth Plagueis knows something that Sidious doesn't. So, yeah, I do think it could be revealed down the line, but that's just not the impression that I got. T-Toy Review asks if I'm happy with the end of Star Wars Rebels and if there's anything that I would change. I would have had the Rebels pay a bit of a higher price. I mean, we lost Gregor and that was very sad, but I feel like their crew in that last episode was made up of a lot of expendable secondary characters, and losing more of them would have made the victory over Lothal, I think, a little more meaningful and significant, and like it was a hard-fought win. As for the ending itself and kind of future implications, I'm not really crazy that Thrawn's future is tied up with Ezra and now maybe Ahsoka and Sabine's. I kind of wanted to just get more stories of him on his own. We still might. We don't know what happened with him and Ezra. But I guess I was kind of expecting that this chapter in Star Wars would be closed and it wouldn't be left open-ended. And it kind of feels like, okay, well now the next animated series might feature Ahsoka again, and Ezra, and Sabine, and maybe more. And I don't know, I guess, like I've just been saying about Jon Favreau and the whole eras in between episodes 3 and 5, even though this would be after 6, I just want to see a bigger variety of characters and a bigger variety of eras. I want to just see more new stuff, and I don't want to keep revisiting the same characters. But I mean, that's just kind of speculation based on nothing. We don't know what the next series is about, so all my worries may be unfounded, but ultimately I think that Star Wars Rebels as a series, I loved it, and I think that the series did end in an exciting way, and I was still excited for Ahsoka showing up at the end and the hints that they might go off in search of Ezra. That might just be concluded in books or comics, I don't know, and I think I would be happier with that. But yeah, ultimately, I really loved Star Wars Rebels. LegoMan716 wants to know why Jacen Syndulla looks pretty much human and not like a mix between a human and a Twi'lek. I'm just going to guess that it has to do with genetics and that the human and the Twi'lek traits are all dominant and recessive genes, and all of Jacen's human traits won out against his Twi'lek ones. But I don't really have any more speculation beyond that. Z-Man Gamer asks what happened to AP5 at the end of Star Wars Rebels, and also what happened to Hondo's crew after the Clone Wars. Well, there was an earlier episode in Star Wars Rebels where Hondo mentioned his crew being wiped out or arrested by the Empire, so that's what happened to them. As for AP5, since he wasn't in those last episodes, I just assume he was back at Yavin 4 on the base doing inventory, and I have no reason to believe there's anything else more to it than that. That's all the time I have for questions today. If you want to leave a question for next week's video, just leave it in the comments below or sign up for Patreon to join our weekly Q&A discussion. If you haven't already, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. As always, thanks for watching, and may the Force be with you.